Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for that warm introduction. I'm extremely happy to be here today. I applaud Aon and Rebuild's organizers for bringing us together today to exchange ideas about the social problems of the digital age and for urging us to address what might be done to solve them now and in the future. So I study digital technology in a way that's neither utopian nor dystopian, but rather oriented to a critical understanding of how the most powerful economic and political structures of society shapes technology and vice versa. This can be tough, though, today, as there are some ways of thinking about technology that aren't so illuminating. So in my talk today, I'm going to begin by probing a few of those. Then I'm going to say a few words about how the system shapes the digital age. And finally, I'm going to highlight some emerging forms of popular resistance to the digital age's problems and discontents. So overall, what I'm going to try to do here today is synthesize some of what the leading critical political economists of communication are saying about the digital age and the challenges that arise as a result. So one way of thinking about digital technology is technological optimism. This is the idea that each and every new technological development moves us forward toward a future society that is better than the previous one. Generation after generation, innovation after innovation, TED Talk after TED Talk, we're invited to see new technology as the same as social progress. And this is a long-standing trope. But what happens is that when we realize that old social problems persist and new ones have grown, we feel disappointed in our hardware and our software and in ourselves. Technological pessimism, another way of thinking about technology that has a long history in modernity, starts to set in. And everyone begins blaming technology for all of society's problems, seeing technology as responsible for making them much worse. In response to technological pessimism, people try to innovate a way out, to create a technological fix of sorts. And with each new technological innovation, hope returns. And the historical pattern of optimism and pessimism repeats over and over again. So, for example, in the mid-1990s, technological optimism surrounded the internet. In 1994, the year that the US federal government opened the public internet to privatization, Esther Dyson, Alvin Toffler, and others published Cyberspace and the American Dream, a manifesto that presented a marketized internet as, quote, renewing the American dream and enhancing the American dream's promise. Really inspiring stuff. But skip ahead, a few years to the year 2000, and cyber optimism had lost its luster. Survivalists, cults, and conspiracy theorists were spreading dystopian nightmares of an internet-induced social breakdown. As the first dot-com bubble burst, many feared the Y2K computer bug would end America and eventually end the world. Techno-pessimism was back in, converging soon after with the terrorist attacks of 9/11 and the subsequent global war on terror. So in the early 2000s, Tim O'Reilly and Dale Doherty breathed new life into technological optimism. Pronouncing a shift from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0, they kickstarted a new wave of hope and speculation. Web 2.0 supposedly heralded a new and better internet that was more user-friendly and supported more user content, participation, and interoperability. As YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and other Web 2.0 firms grew, they promised to liberate everyone and democratize everything. Facebook would unite the world as one. Twitter would overturn autocracies and spread democracy around the world. Google would do the right thing, would not be evil. Thanks to firms like these, Time Magazine's 2006 Person of the Year was you. Remember that cover? Happy days returned to Silicon Valley, and its Californian ideology's mix of radical individualism, free market libertarianism, and anti-statism seemed to stave off calls for digital public policy and regulation of the kind that we read a lot about today. But over the next decade, all of the upstart technology companies that promised to disrupt the big legacy media to empower everyone and everything actually grew more powerful and more controlling. Over the past few years, a lot of people have taken notice, and unsurprisingly, technological pessimism seems to have returned. So in the first month of 2019, Facebook had 2.32 billion monthly users, a sum more than double the total combined populations of the 29 countries that make up the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Yet, far from propelling these users into a better and radically different future, Facebook arguably reflects old and new social problems, such as an asymmetrical power relation between an increasingly oligopolistic firm and everyone else, the concentration of wealth and political power, moves to regulatory capture at the level of government, mass surveillance and the loss of privacy, and a glut of digital information and ads. 40,000 Google searches happen every second. Every minute of the day in a month, 400,000 tweets are sent on Twitter, 4 million videos are watched on YouTube, and all of this adds to 2.5 quintillion bytes of data getting produced each day. Well, big data promises to manage all of this for us and manage us with its new smart devices. Many people feel overwhelmed, feel confused, feel afraid. In an age of Facebook privacy breaches, misinformation campaigns, angry Twitter presidents, Google filter bubbles, YouTube echo chambers, mass technological pessimism is understandable. There are good reasons to feel worried, concerned, anxious about the present and where we're going in the future. But while technological pessimism seems to be winning out over technological optimism in the public mind of today, neither of these ways of thinking, utopian or dystopian, helps us to understand how society itself shapes technology, and in turn, how technology shapes society. So how might digital technology transform or preserve society's reigning political and economic power relations? Are we all really living through a digital revolution that is changing everything for better or worse? We are not the first to ask these kinds of questions, not the first to see digital technology as revolutionary. From Daniel Bell's The Coming of the Post-Industrial Society, to Alvin Toffler's The Third Wave, to Eric Schmidt and Jared Cohen's The New Digital Age, Silicon Valley futurists have predicted that digital technology would radically change society, and at every level. But I encourage a healthy skepticism of this trope of technological revolutionism, as too often it is used to shore up the status quo. How's that so? Well, for some time, tech companies have mobilized the trope of techno revolution for branding purposes. Apple offers one of my favorite examples of this. I think you might remember this, but some of you might be too young. During the 1984 TV broadcast of the Super Bowl, Apple famously launched the ad 1984. A play on George Orwell's dystopian science fiction novel, 1984 associated Apple's business with freedom from government control and introduced the company's new Macintosh computer with a statement of revolution. Soon after, hundreds of thousands marched down to the mall and spent $155 million on Apple products. Not so revolutionary. All too often, our desire for social change is steered into more of the same. Politicians also deploy the trope of techno-revolution for purposes of statecraft and international public diplomacy. So 4 years after Apple branded its computers as a symbol of revolt, the US President Ronald Reagan visited Moscow State University and told a similar tale. Nearing the end of the Cold War, standing beneath the bust of Lenin, Reagan declared that a technological revolution was, quote, quietly sweeping the globe without bloodshed or conflict. In an attempt to persuade Soviet students to reject their Marxist icons and accept the US's path to a post-socialist future, Reagan depicted the vanguard of this global revolution as, quote, the tech entrepreneurs, the men with the courage to take risks and the faith enough to brave the unknown, end quote. For Reagan, history's revolutionaries were people like the late Steve Jobs and his Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak. And as Reagan said, these were the founders and the revolutionaries of one of the largest personal computer firms in the world, and they made this happen from the garage behind their home. Today, companies and governments continue to represent everything from cordless Apple earbuds to virtual reality to the Internet of Things to artificial intelligence as revolutionary technologies that will radically change everything, as agents and tools that will disrupt the old and let us begin anew. And this takes us all toward a new age, or at least we hope. Now, such ideas of revolutionary change are firmly embedded in mainstream media and shape the public mind. Do a Google search for digital revolution, and in half a second, you'll be presented with millions of headlines declaring, it is here, it is now. Now, captivating as that idea might be, it does not offer us a clear view of what's actually going on, nor does it provide us with knowledge of why so many are being left out of these big changes. For starters, a significant prerequisite to being included in the digital age is access to the internet, computer hardware and software, and digital literacy skills. But none of this is anywhere close to being universally provisioned. At present, only a little over half of the world's population is online. Less than half of the world's households own a personal computer. The divide between the digital haves and have-nots is vast, between and within countries. So even in the United States, the land of tech liberty, nearly 30% of rural Americans, that's 19 million people, lack broadband access. While the United Nations Human Rights Council resolved in 2016 to support human rights on the internet, only a few countries today treat internet access as a citizenship right. Most relegate it to a consumer choice. So each year, big telecom companies like AT&T and Verizon make billions selling internet access as a commodity to those who can afford it. But what about the millions of people who can't afford it? What about the millions of people who are left out? The diffusion, use, and impact of digital technology, far from encompassing humanity as a whole, is unevenly developed and unequally accessible. Not everyone is living the digital revolution. More fundamentally, the notion that this new age is revolutionary is kind of misleading or perhaps an overstatement. So what does revolution mean? Well, historically, a revolution implies a sweeping transformation of society as a whole, something that breaks radically with what came before. Whether fast or slow, violent or peaceful, revolutions happen when a people find the will to overturn the inequitable conditions of an older social order, thereby bringing about the possibility of bringing about and building a different type of society. Think the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the Russian Revolution. In all of these, the popular will was mobilized, and with help from new technologies. But technologies did not in themselves cause the revolutions. People did. So those who say otherwise subscribe to technological determinism, and that's a reductionist theory of social change that takes technology to be the central agent in society and the cause affecting all of society's greatest transformations. So during the Obama presidency, we might remember, the US State Department, CNN, and Fox News represented American-centered social media as causing popular revolts in states that, unsurprisingly, US military hawks wanted to topple. Iran's 2009 Twitter revolution, Syria's 2011 YouTube revolution. These were one-dimensional explanations for much more complex conditions that produced these uprisings. Of course, technology played a role, but technology did not in itself determine these revolts. Societies are always changing, no doubt. Certainly, some or many of the present society's changes are related to digital technology. Yet our society continues to have continuities with the past, and these tend to be overlooked when we simply buy into the dream that we're living in a revolutionary age, all because of digital technology alone. So what's the same? What's the same as what came before? Around the world, companies continue to accumulate profit amid widespread poverty. National security, not social welfare enhancement, continues to preoccupy many state governments. So if the past is any guide to our present, the two most important institutions of modernity, those being capital and the territorial nation state, will likely design and try to redeploy today's digital tools as they have past technological advances. And what will they do with that? They'll reinforce their power, they'll reinvent their control, and they'll try to recompose their action. That's what history teaches us about technology. Those structures have been around for the past 400 years or so, and they routinely shape technology for their ends. So in that regard, most new technology is not inherently revolutionary, but is part and product of modernity's big political and economic power structures, capital and the nation state. And we have to take those seriously when we're thinking about going beyond the present into a different future, if indeed that's what we want to do. After all, no technology invents itself and wills to radically change the world, although those that are currently developing AI might disagree with me. From smartphones to search algorithms, all technology gets made in society. Most of the time, it is made by people, social relations between people, in governments, for example, in the US Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. The corporate sector, like venture capital funded tech firms, and universities as well, like MIT, Stanford University, OnTechU, and elsewhere. However, the organizations that make technology are themselves shaped by an even larger system-level structure. So for political economists like Robert McChesney, who gave the wonderful keynote yesterday, like Dan Schiller, like Ursula Hughes, like Shoshana Zuboff, like Nick Dyer-Witherford, the structure, the system structure that they focus on is the predominant force shaping technology is the big C word, capitalism. And capitalism's logics, from private ownership of the means of production, social division, waged labor, profit, inequality, international expansion, states supporting resident corporations, capital continues to play a very significant role in shaping technology today. And we have to understand that, and that's what political economists of communication try to do. So, far from being disrupted or overturned by digital technology in the digital age, capital has been given a firmware update. The system's underlying code continues to direct new technologies toward its ends, and that system, not technology in itself, may be the key source of some of the digital revolution's discontents. So here's how old logics of capital continue to play out in the present, shaping technology powerfully. So, first of all, in a digital age, private corporations, beholden to shareholders, not the broad public or even governments, are the major owners of the means of technological production, circulation. Now, currently, American firms own the lion's share of the world's hardware and software, intellectual property rights, platforms, sites, services, and user data. The US giants really are the titans of the global digital age. According to the Forbes Global 2000 list of the world's largest companies, the 5 most valuable corporations in the world are Apple, Alphabet Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Facebook. In 2018, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, the FANG in investor speak, accounted for more than 11% of the Standard & Poor's 500 index. Capitalism continues, and corporations, not publics or governments, preside over the digital age's major means of managing the accumulation of capital. Also, the age-old division between bosses and workers, rich and poor, persists in the digital age, despite our great hopes that technology will emancipate all. We're not living in a classless society, nowhere near one. Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos is worth about $153 billion. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is worth over $62.3 billion. Occupying a different place in the social hierarchy are Amazon and Facebook workers, and those workers being the people who sell their labor power, their mind, their skills, their talent, their creativity on the market in exchange for the wages they need to live. Amazon employs about 600,000 workers at massive fulfillment centers, and as we know, packers sort commodities into boxes round the clock. Well, Facebook uses the free labor of the users who sign up and log into the site and leverages the content they generate to keep people coming back for more. Facebook also employs about 40,000 workers. Thousands of content moderators behind the scenes review the posts that violate Facebook's community guidelines. Far from being creative and self-actualizing, the digital work of taking down dick pics, blocking beheading videos, halting hate propaganda is often traumatizing and alienating for those who do it. And there's been a lot of really good investigative journalism on this content moderation process. So capitalism and the difficulties of waged work continue in our digital age. Moreover, in the digital age, increasingly monopolistic companies compete to produce and sell goods and services as commodities for exchange in the market, primarily in pursuit of profit, not in the first instance in pursuit of social need or meeting human need. For example, in 2015, Google became a subsidiary of Alphabet, swapping its "don't be evil" motto for "do the right thing." In 2018, that included seizing upon the data generated by 1 billion people, conducting over 3.5 billion Google searches per day in order to generate $115 billion in ad revenue. Each day, advertisers bid to buy what Facebook sells. And what is Facebook selling? The opportunity to expose its users to ads for their products. In 2017, the average Facebook user is worth about $20 to the firm. In 2018, Facebook's average user profile is worth about $25, and it accumulated $17.8 billion in ad revenue that year. So we are, in a sense, Facebook's commodities exchanged by the company with advertisers. So capitalism and the pursuit of profit continue, and in a digital age, profit frequently clashes with personal privacy, and profit gets made through the production, monetization, and sale of personal and demographic data. Also, in the digital age, we are living in a very unequal one. In 2018, as business profits soared, the gap between the rich and the poor widened. The globe's 26 richest people owned as much wealth as the poorest 50%, and the wealthiest 1% of the global population own more than half of the world's total wealth. The average CEO to worker pay ratio was at least 339 to 1, and as CEO compensation increased, wages seemed to stagnate. Jeff Bezos is the world's richest person. In 11.5 seconds, Bezos makes the annual salary of an Amazon warehouse worker. That's about $30,000 every 11.5 seconds. 9 in 10 Silicon Valley workers are increasingly scraping by on lower wages, and sadly, many are making less in 2018 than they did in 1997. So there's been a lot of really interesting analysis of this depression of wages in Silicon Valley. So capitalism continues, and with that, in the digital age, inequality persists. So far from heralding that wonderful global village of peace and love and understanding, all the things that the internet was supposed to support, interstate warfare continues on battlefields and over digital markets. As US tech corporations expand around the world, they clash in trade wars with Chinese giants such as Tencent, Alibaba, and Baidu. The US and Chinese governments support their national tech titans in competitions to control the global digital network and data sources. And right now we're seeing a really significant rivalry between China and the US over the control of the future internet. Each uses their might to knock down or prop up national rules that serve their resident companies' bottom line. Now, the US is the dominant player of the digital age, but China is on the rise. Most smaller countries, including Canada, often acquiesce to US digital companies and American policy norms, seeing this as synonymous with our national development. To attract foreign direct investments, we offer the FANG subsidies, tax breaks, lax regulation. Sometimes governments support the building of entire communities to meet Silicon Valley's human capital needs. The costs of supporting digital development are socialized, while the returns are absorbed and often flow back to US capital. Global capital and clashes between governments, the most powerful, rivalrous governments in the world, indeed continue in the digital age. It has not given us a genuinely harmonious, unified global village, although we'd like one, perhaps. Clearly, the internet and personal computers and websites have not radically disrupted the existing system, nor the logics of capital. They continue to be reproduced, shaping digital technology and shaping society. So for those of us, of you, of those watching, who believe that another system is possible. And I sense a lot of positive and excitement energy in this room for proposals to rebuild the system, to rebuild technology, to rebuild the network, to push beyond some kind of different economic and political arrangement. So for those of us who believe another system is possible and want to make it, let's take note. This is a fundamental point. Social reforms and revolutions do not happen only when technology is left to its own devices. They happen when large numbers of people push for change through workplaces, through governments, in the streets, in the networks, and they do this with technology and also by redesigning technology. So that's sort of the ingredients for social change. Currently, many people are doing this, and that gives me hope. So let me conclude my talk with some optimistic examples of human-centric and technological social change experiments. Historically, most tech workers did not see themselves as workers. Recently, though, some have developed a class consciousness, and they are uniting to challenge part-time, poorly paid and precarious forms of work, discrimination and oppression on the job, and the dispossession of their creativity. Some are joining or forming unions, others are creating nonprofits, some are starting cooperatives. Here's a few interesting recent examples. Amazon worker unionization campaigns are rallying people with the slogan, "Make Amazon Pay." Digital journalists are unionizing to demand better pay, job security, and benefits, as well as equity policies and editorial freedom over their content. Google workers have united to demand that their bosses cut their ties to the military-industrial complex and stop creating technologies that support the weapons of war. Facebook users are collectively demanding more control and compensation for the data they produce. Even Instagram members are rabble-rousing these days. As IGM Meme Union Local 69420 declares, memers of the world unite. Outside of the tech industry, popular social movements are challenging and trying to rein in the FANG's power with digital public policy proposals that align with principles of democracy and social justice. Some propose antitrust laws to diminish the growing monopoly powers of the digital giants. Others say that since public subvention gave us the internet, perhaps the internet should be returned to the public as a public utility. Around the world, people are fighting to make internet access genuinely universally accessible, a basic social right for all. Some are also trying to loosen, if not break free, from the FANG's grip on their data by pushing for privacy and data rights. Others are boycotting the FANG and going with smaller players. Instead of messaging with Facebook's WhatsApp, they are using Telegram. They search DuckDuckGo, not Google. Furthermore, people are pressing their governments to get the FANG to pay their fair share of taxes. Now, remember, billions in public subsidies, billions in tax dollars help the FANG to grow. Yet these firms are chronic tax evaders these days. Additionally, media reformers say that the billions that Facebook and Google annually accumulate in online advertising revenue should be taxed, with a portion of those monies going to a public fund for public interest journalism. That might help get us out of the crisis journalism is currently experiencing and help us to create journalism that is democracy and citizen nourishing. So to conclude, digital technology does not itself change the world. People with digital technology, redesigning digital technology, using digital technology do. All of you here today and watching online have an opportunity to redesign and use technology to create an ecologically sustainable and different future in which all are freed from the realm of necessity and where all are empowered to participate in democracy. My hope is that you will rise to this challenge. The system's barriers to a real digital and social revolution are high, but they're not insurmountable. We all have much to learn from the tech workers, engineers, designers, citizens, activists, and educators who are probing the political and economic structures behind the digital age's discontents and pushing us all toward a better future. So let's radically redesign technology and rebuild society at the same time. After all, technology is part and product of society, so our chances for success at changing the former will be greatly increased when we put our minds, hands, and hearts to rebuilding the latter.